Welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Dan Hughes, and I was the webinar trainer for Nix Software for many years. I still do webinars for Nix Software for DxO, and over the past couple of years, I've been getting to know and using PhotoLab. We're now on PhotoLab 4. I'm going to be using PhotoLab 4 Elite, but none of the things that we're going to talk about, or I should say, I can't think of any differences that we're going to cover today between the Elite version and sort of the standard version. So we are going to also talk about FilmPack a little bit. We'll get into that. Today's demonstration, we are talking about single-click preset solutions, specifically in this case for portraits and landscapes, but in general, I'm going to talk to you about presets, how you can make your own, how to create your own, what's built into the software, how to navigate those parts. And then I want to give you a once-over, a talk about FilmPack, because there's some really beautiful, wonderful, interesting things that you can do with your images using the FilmPack 5 software. Now, I'm going to jump over into one of these images. Let's start with this picture. And you should be able to see we're within PhotoLab. And before we jump into presets and I show you all of that stuff, I do want to just mention a few things about the interface here. And then starting out in that regard, by the way, I'm on a Mac computer, I should mention that. There are subtle differences between Mac and PC, although the stuff that we're talking about today, there shouldn't be any major differences. Anyways, follow my cursor up into the top portion of the toolbar. I'm going to click where it says Workspaces. And right now I'm on the DxO Standard workspace. There's also the DxO Advanced, and then a workspace that basically contains only the new stuff. That is the differences between the previous version of PhotoLab and the current version. And then the other thing that I have is a couple of my own custom workspaces. So I kind of, if I'm working with infrared photography, there are kind of only certain tools that I focus on when processing my infrared images. And so I've set up an infrared workspace for my digital infrared workflow. And then I also kind of stick to my own process. And that could actually confuse me a little bit today, as we're going to kind of stick with the DxO Standard workspace. But just to sort of show you the difference, right now we're on DxO Standard, and you'll note right now on the right side of the interface, we basically have the basic tools, which is the stuff that you absolutely need to get started if you've never done image processing or if you've never used PhotoLab before. These are the fantastic, powerful tools that you need to get started with. And then I've got DxO Viewpoint and DxO FilmPack plugins installed into my PhotoLab. So those are going to show up as well. But if I go into Workspaces and I just click on DxO Advanced, you're going to notice I have a whole slew of different tools that show up here. And this is basically everything that's within these parts or this part of the interface, the tools packets, if you will. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out, especially because maybe you're following along with the software open. We're basically going to be dealing with the DxO Standard interface for now. If you're a user of the Advanced, this stuff will translate. I will have a slightly simpler looking interface. All right, so the other thing to note is right now we are in the Customize. If you follow me to the upper left portion of the interface here, the Customize section of PhotoLab 4, which is where we would look at our histogram, zoom in, check out our metadata, adjust the image with our image processing tools, control points, and so on. But I do want to move over into the photo library, and we're actually going to bounce back and forth a little bit between Customize and photo library because there's some cool stuff that you can do with presets in the photo library where we're applying, the same preset to a whole bunch of images very quickly. You can do the same thing in Customize. I just want to make sure that we get a good idea of what's happening. Anyways, the photo library section here, this is where you would tag images. You would go and find them in your folder structure over here on the left side of the interface. I've specifically built a folder for our single-click preset FilmPack, but what you would probably happen on your own interface is that you're going to have folders that have images in the folder, and you're going to be able to click on that folder to then obviously view whatever is inside of that folder. You know, here we're doing that same thing. It's just I have a sort of smattering of different images, as opposed to, you know, this day when I was in Ithaca, New York, and I was shooting the waterfall all day, basically. So I have, you know, any number of different images of the same location all in the same folder. Anyways, that's why my folder looks this way. I chose these images kind of as a display for this webinar. So that's another little difference between probably how your workflow will work compared to this one that you're seeing on our webinar. All right, so I've clicked back into customize in the upper left corner. If you follow me into the upper right corner, we're going to start down the road of our presets. So in the far upper right corner of the interface, there's a presets button. And if you press that button, your presets interface jumps up or pops up. And in here, the portrait and landscapes open up automatically for me, by default anyways. But if you click on the twirler or the expand collapse box, this little triangle here, you can see we've closed down. And these are all presets that are just built right into DxO PhotoLab. You've got your portrait and landscape, which is primarily what we'll talk about today. Some great black and white conversion presets, atmospheres, high dynamic range single shot. So this is a way to pull out the full dynamic range of a scene. Presets that are designed for smartphones. And then presets that are built into FilmPack. So if you have FilmPack, you will see 6 and 7 here. If you don't have FilmPack, I don't think these will show up. So you've got to have the FilmPack software installed as well for 6 and 7. And then number 8 is actually camera specific. DxO has this really wonderful camera called the DxO One. It came out several years ago. And these are presets that are made specifically for that. Anyways, moving into the general purpose presets, because I do want to point these out. As I click and open into them, you'll see a label for each one, and then you'll see what's called a heads-up display of what your image would look like if you clicked on it, right? And the difference between these different things right here are obviously I've got some, well, these aren't built in. These are my custom presets. I'm sorry, hang on just a second. Okay, general purpose presets, yep. Number 1, standard preset. Number 2, is the DxO optical corrections only. Number 3 is neutral colors. Number 4 is black and white. If I were to click on one, like let's click on black and white, the tools that are over here on the right-hand side are being adjusted to convert the image from color to black and white in a single click, right? And that's the beauty of a preset, is that all you have to do, as I click back into it, is click on that individual image, and all of the adjustments that are built into that particular set of instructions, that preset, will be applied to the image. Just to kind of follow up there, the DxO standard preset, that is all of the great magic that automatically gets applied to your image as you launch into PhotoLab. So some of the beauties of the PhotoLab raw processing software is that it has an optical correction, as well as some light and color massaging tone adjustments that automatically happen to your image to try to optimize your photograph right off the bat. And this preset is what's happening when you launch the software by default, right? I just clicked on it, and I think I turned it off by clicking on it a second time. So anyways, here, I didn't mean to click on it again. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm jumping around. Those are your general purpose presets, right? No correction. Jaipur preset, this is one that I had made myself. I'll show you how to do that. And Rachel Portrait Shoot, that's another preset that I had made. What I do want to focus on today are the portrait and landscape presets. Pardon. Excuse me, sorry. So the portrait and landscape presets here, these are single click heads up presets. You can see what your image would look like, and you can actually see a pretty dramatic difference between portrait standard and something like candy colors or high key, right? There's a dramatic difference in color and in tone And the beauty of these is that you can see exactly what would happen before you even click on it. And if you like what's happening, you click on it. Let's say candy colors. I like what's happening with this one. And it applies a bunch of different adjustments to your image to create that preset. Now, specifically, it applies the tools that are highlighted when I click on this button in the upper right-hand corner. So this button here indicates to me the adjustments that are currently active, right? So it's a little switch, it's highlighted in blue, and when it's on, it's informing me that the software is using exposure compensation, smart lighting, selective. All of these things are in action to adjust the image, right? And that's an important thing to sort of think about, because if I go and I click on a different preset, let's go into this landscape contrasty. Now I've got a different set of tools that are adjusting the image. And it's kind of just an important thing to note. If you turn this off, you're going to see all of those tools. And if you've got that active corrections option on, you're only going to see the tools that are currently being used on the image. And these are those tools. All right, so let's go back into presets. We've got our, which one did I click on? The Jaipur contrasty. I'm actually going to stick with this candy colored one. I kind of like what's happening there. It's a little bit funky. And now, once you've clicked on a preset, if you're happy with it, you're done. You don't have to do anything. But one of the beauties of presets is you use them as a starting point, which basically means, you know, you click on it, you get most of the work done that you want done on the image, but you might look at the image and assess and figure out you might want something else. Like in this case, I think actually cropping the image down a little bit could be helpful. I don't know if we need the top portion of the image, and I think I'd like to kind of direct the viewer's attention in towards our subject a little bit more. So once you've clicked on a preset, you can go into the different tools to make your adjustments. Now, right now, all of these tools are being adjusted, and I don't think my crop tool is one. Oh, it is, but it's cropping with the automatic adjustments. By the way, you notice I'm sort of making these things disappear. If you ever want to display a tool that's collapsed, you just click on the text or to the right of the text up at the top. So with color accentuation, I can just click there. It opens up the vibrancy and saturation, so the two sliders that are built into color actuation, and that's how you can open or close each one of these. I've just been doing it to kind of clean up the look of the interface, because having a lot of them open can be kind of overwhelming to look at. All right, so cropping. So I'm going to go into my correction tool. I'm going to click on manual. I'm going to leave my aspect ratio at original, although if you ever are interested in changing the aspect ratio, that is sort of the shape of the image, the ratio of the tall compared to the tall compared to the horizontal, right? You can click into the aspect ratio and you can choose from any of these, as well as use unconstrained if you want to kind of create your own custom crop. A lot of times, if you're going to be printing the image, or if you know your photograph is going to be uploaded to a website or Instagram or something like that, it's a good idea to crop specifically for whatever your output is. You don't have to do it right at the beginning, but it's a good idea to kind of know what you're going to do with the image ahead of time, so that you don't do a whole bunch of work and then figure out afterwards that you need to do more or different work to correct the image for a particular output, for a particular kind of reason to do these things. Okay, so aspect ratio is set to original. I'm going to click on the crop tool, and then I'm just going to click on the upper right corner, and I'm going to drag this down, and let's go ahead and recenter. And while having the subject in the center isn't always the most interesting thing in the image, I think it kind of works in this case with this composition, so I'll run with it. And then we're just going to click the close button, because I'm not going to go too far in depth into every single aspect of the crop tool, but we are going to click that close button because that's going to apply our crop. Okay, so we've cropped the image. And that's something that we need to keep in mind as well. Should we be saving this as a custom preset, right? But that isn't the last thing I wanted to do. So let's crop, and then I want to go back into the vignette tool, and I'm going to go into manual for vignetting, and I'm just going to reduce this vignetting a little bit, which isn't going to do a whole lot for us right now, but is going to allow me to sort of know that I'm not, well, so if I bring this all the way down, the bottom part of the image is actually going to get a little bit darker. I probably should explain what's going on there. With this vignetting tool on, it's going to be correcting the image. And in this case, I don't want to correct the bottom of the image. I actually want it to be a little bit darker so that it directs the viewer's attention in towards our subject, right? Now, let's say we really like what we've done to this. We haven't made any dramatic changes to light and color or anything like that, but let's just move over to the left-hand side of the interface. So I just realized that we've already spent kind of 20 minutes on this one image, and we've got plenty of other things to look at. I'm gonna hide all of these tools by just clicking on them, and that's gonna hide them, and we're gonna look at the preset editor, right? So inside the preset editor, we have access to all of the presets that we used or we looked at in the upper right corner. The beauty of this part of the interface, the upper right corner, is when you click on it, you actually see these heads-up images, these heads-up sort of displays, so you know what would happen when you click on it. But in the preset editor over on the left-hand side, you have access to all of those same presets. So once you get used to using presets, or maybe after you create a couple of your own custom presets, maybe you don't always have to go into that preset button in the upper right corner. You just move over into your preset editor and then click on the preset that you want, right? So, and by the way, the portrait and landscape, these are the same presets as we were just looking at within that other section. So I'm going to minimize this. And you know, let's say we like all of the things that we did to this image and we wanted to save this as our own custom preset. Really, all we did was crop the image and I turned off some vignetting. But anyways, if you move into the preset editor in the lower left corner, this button is going to allow you to create a new preset based upon all of the things that you've done to your image. We're going to do that in a second. This button, it looks like a little folder. It allows you to create a preset group, right? And just to point out what that is, each one of these, 1 through 8, are preset groups. They're folders, bins, or preset groups, right? They're just in these little folders. If I scroll down, you'll see a series of presets that are not inside of a bin or inside of a preset. Geez, I've already forgotten the term. Group. It's called a group. Yeah. So if I were going to make a whole bunch of custom presets, I would probably want to click on this button, and I would call these, you know, Dan made or something like that. And then when we go into or we start creating our own presets, you can kind of house them within a folder somewhere. So with that said, let's go ahead and add the adjustments we made to this image as a custom preset. And to do that, again, you click on this button in the lower left, and it's going to go into that Dan made folder. And I'm just going to call this candy color with crop. Any image that we want to have applied with that preset, we just click on that preset and it will apply all of those adjustments. We're going to go a little bit further in depth into that. I'll show you this a couple times. All right, so from there, I actually have these 2 presets as well, and maybe I want to put these inside of my Dan made presets. So if one ever falls outside of a folder that you want it in, you should be able to just click and drag and add it into your particular group that you want. Folder. There we go. Okay, so now I've got all 3 of my I call them recipes, all 3 of my presets built in. Okay, cool. Let's click on this image here. All of these images that we're dealing with, by the way, are raw files of some format. This is a raw file from a Canon camera, so you'll see it says CR2 in the bottom of the interface. We're going to move into our presets. You're going to see that same stuff coming up. So portrait standard, portrait bright, portrait candy colors, high key, and then we've got our 4 built-in landscape presets as well. So I'm going to go with the portrait standard preset, and as I click on this, I'm gonna just click on it, and it'll take a second, but you can see it kind of snaps to, right? And in fact, if you follow me to the left-hand side of the interface into the history, you can click on and see the difference between the two. So over here on the left side where it says apply default preset, that's the magic that DxO PhotoLab 4 does automatically. If I click on here, this is the preset that we just clicked on, and just because it's a preset, another really interesting, fun, and cool option, if you click on the little twirler that's to the left, this is where you can turn different tools on and off, and then you can also get a sense of you get a sense of what's happening in the tool. So in this preset, we are using the contrast adjustment, the automatic micro contrast, the contrast is on, and all of these tools are basically being applied to the image, right? So that's a good way to be able to see what's happening. You should be able to see what's happening over here on the right-hand side as well. Like if I click into contrast, you'll see that we have 40 contrast being added and 5 micro contrast being added. I think with this image, we could maybe go into the DxO smart lighting, and I'm going to bring that down a little bit because the smart lighting can be really quite wonderful to enhance the image. But sometimes if you're making a really dramatic image, in this case, this is a studio lit image, and it's sort of supposed to be really dramatic with the really dark shadows. Sometimes it's nice to be able to go in and remove those different tools. In this case, I think smart lighting at 5 and set to the custom mode is going to be a good setting for that. That said, I actually need to go and turn on a tool. So I'm going to go switch off what's currently active. That's going to yield all of my tools from my basic section here. And I'm going to go into my selective tone, and I'm just going to reduce the highlights a little bit. So what was happening when highlights was set at 0 is his skin tone, and then a part of some of his, oh shoot, I don't remember the official term for these. Maybe somebody can tell me. Part of his uniform here is a little bit blown out, right? So I'm going to move into my highlight slider, and I'm going to start bringing that to the left. It's going to darken down those very bright values, and we're going to see more of the detail and then a more even skin tone as well. So you're able to click on the preset as we have, and then move over to the right-hand side of the tools palette and make any adjustments that you need to or you see fit. In this case, I might even cool the image off a little bit because it's a little bit warm there. That's probably closer to the actual color. And if we really like this as a preset, we can save it. Now, we're going to keep moving here. I've got one more portrait that I definitely want to show you. This is my brother-in-law, Ricky, and his friend, the goat. And this is a cute picture. This was shot with a Hasselblad X1D, XD1. Yeah, XD1. Anyways, I had the white balance set wrong, right? And so one of the problems that you can run into is when you've got a white balance adjustment wrong is you have to go in and kind of click around to make sure that you set the white balance properly. But one of the things that you could do is actually just set your white balance basic tool here to whatever the correct setting is. In this case, it's daylight. And then if I have a whole folder of these images, which I don't right now, but I'll show you what to do if you did, we're going to adjust this daylight, right, or this white balance. And then I'm going to move over and I'm going to make sort of like a preset that we can end up discarding afterwards. So I'm going to click this plus button here. I'm going to actually not put it into the Dan made because I'm going to end up deleting this. So I'm going to click create new preset. I'm going to call this daylight color balance, right? So I know that I have a whole folder of images that had, for some reason, the wrong color balance set, or they were a stop overexposed because I forgot to turn my exposure value adjustment off or something. So I can make this recipe / preset, go back over into my photo library, and then if I want to adjust the preset to all of these images, I can actually just highlight all of them. So to do that, you just click on one of the images. So I've clicked on this image of the waterfall, and then hold the Shift key down, click on the other end or whatever the grouping of images you need to enable this tool with. It's X1D. I was shot with the X1D. Or I think you can actually hit Command A. Yeah, and that selects everything as well as a shortcut on a Mac. I would imagine that's Control A on a PC. And now that everything's selected, I can go to my presets, and my preset there, my daylight preset, should actually be, well, wherever I left it. In this case, I put it inside the sort of general purpose. So it's not in a specific folder, it's in the general purpose presets. I'll show you again what that looks like very quickly. But this is my daylight color balance, right? So I can click on this and it's going to adjust all of those images. Now, technically that's incorrect. I don't actually want that on all of these images, but that's what you would do if you wanted to very quickly correct an entire folder of of images. You correct one image in the folder and then select all of them and then apply that preset. And it's very quick and very simple to do. So what I just did was hit Command Z as well, and that went back one step and it undid all of that applied recipe, if that makes sense, applied preset. I keep calling them recipes. They're actually presets, that's the term. So let's tie up or button up our sort of preset portion of the webinar here. I'm going to click on Customize. I've clicked on this individual image here. Let's say I decide I don't want that daylight balance preset anymore. We just want to get rid of it. All you have to do is go into the preset editor, and I think you can click Edit and then Discard. But in this case, we don't even need to do that. We can actually just right-click on it and then click Remove, and that'll get rid of it. So that'll delete that preset. We don't need it. All right. So let's keep moving with this, and then we probably should talk a little bit about how to use the preset editor a little bit more. It's pretty straightforward once you know where the buttons are. So I'll just show you where those buttons are. Let's click on a preset. So I'm going to go back into my heads-up display here, into the actual presets section, so we can look at these images. Let's see what happens if I click on the polarized. There we go. Now it's very quick. So the problem with these webinars is maybe you don't see the adjustment being made. But let's say we love that. And we just need to go in and make a couple of small changes. Let's go into color accentuation. Let's actually increase the saturation a little bit. And then I say in HSL, let's take the blues and make them a little bit less green. So I'm going to click on blue. And we're going to go into, not luminance, let's go into uniformity and adjust this just ever so slightly. Oops, no, it's not ever so slightly. That's pretty extreme. And then I actually want to turn off, I'm missing a tool because I'm in the basic adjustments, aren't I? Oh, no, it's right here. I want selective tone. What am I talking about? I'm going to reduce my highlights a little bit, sort of bring the key of the image down just a touch. I think that there's some selective adjustments to make to this image as well, in which case you'd actually use the local adjustments, probably place control points on the image to try to dodge and burn the image selectively. If you're not familiar with how the local adjustments tools work, there are recorded webinars and there is some content on YouTube, on the DxO specific YouTube channel that you can watch to get a sense of what the local adjustments would do. I don't think we have enough time to do that today, so I'm going to skip over that, but we definitely could use some dodging and burning to this image. So I've started with the preset. I've kind of adjusted our highlights a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and close up the basic tools, and then let's move into FilmPack, and we're going to make some adjustments using FilmPack. And then we're also going to save it as a preset. I'm going to sort of button up the preset editor for you as well. Now that I think of it, so FilmPack is a whole series of really wonderful tools that allow us to emulate different films and also add some really interesting sort of what one would call maybe aberrations or problems to enhance the aesthetic feel of the image, like adding a light leak to the image or increasing, adding a paper texture or placing a frame on the image. There's blurring, creative vignetting, and so on. We'll actually cover these, all of them, in the next couple minutes. For now, let's move into color rendering. So the color rendering section of the DxO FilmPack, in my mind, is kind of the most important thing if your goal is to emulate a film type. And what you would do here is move into your color rendering section and click on the generic renderings. So on the category, rather, where it says generic renderings by default. And here you can use the generic renderings. You can actually choose different camera bodies as well. By default, the generic rendering is going to be the camera specific rendering. So this is the camera default rendering, right? So that's meant for this particular Olympus camera that this image was shot with. If I were to move into color positive film, I can choose different film types. And what's happening as I maybe click on from AGFA Precision 100, I actually don't know how to pronounce that one term, but we could go to Fuji Profia 400X. And as I click on that, you'll see there's a different contrast and color rendering. Fuji Astia 100, right? So that one's a little more subtle. I think if I click on something like Kodachrome, this will be an extreme change. The oranges will probably be really saturated. Image a little bit washed out in Kodachrome 200, right? And so what you're getting out of this is a new or different aesthetic kind of feel out of the actual color rendering of the raw file. And that's an important thing to mention. A lot of the tools, like if you jump back into the basic tools and you adjust a curve or you make color adjustments to HSL, you're doing that here within PhotoLab in the parametric image editing realm that you're in, which means it's non-destructive, which just means we can go back if we ever needed to or wanted to. But we're doing that basic adjustment technically after the raw data has been rendered. And one of the interesting parts about this color rendering section is that this stuff is being done, it's different math that's occurring in the interpolation and in the processing of the raw data, which basically just means these give you some really interesting different kinds of controls, and it doesn't affect any of the basic tools. I mean, if I go to ADOX color implosion and then I move into highlights or shadows or whatever, you're going to see it change. But the point of these color renderings is that they're doing that. They are changing these tones and colors sort of at the very beginning of the process where you're able to actually see and adjust the image. I don't know if that's a helpful explanation. Anyways, here's the Lomo red scale, really beautiful film type. I'm going to stick with this Kodak Portra 400 emulation. If we needed to or wanted to, we could increase its intensity or decrease its intensity. I'm going to bring it down to about 85. And then underneath the color rendering, you also have your protect saturated colors. So when you click on some of these film types, you're able to then protect the saturated colors. So if you click on one of the renderings that dramatically changes the color, you can use this slider to kind of protect those colors. Long story short. Okay, filter. So this filter tool, I don't find myself using it all that often, but what it does, and maybe this would be really interesting to use on black and white emulations, because I didn't even show you that. You've got color positive, color negative, and then black and white film emulations. And we clicked on the Portra 400. It's just a film that I really like to use currently even. And you have a filter tool which allows you to click on and drag into all of these different kinds of filters as if you're using a warm tone filter in front of your lens, right? That's sort of the idea here. Or a cool tone, or a light orange, or a yellow, and so on and so forth, which actually these filters become really important when using those black and white renderings, because you have your sort of standard color transmission filters that you'd have for black and white film. In this case, I'm going to click on warm tone. I'm going to back that down quite a bit, and the whole image is just going to be subtly warmed. But it's an interesting, fun tool, and I need to play a little bit more with the black and white film emulations, because I bet you that they'd have a really cool dramatic effect that I would like. Moving into the grain, right? So if you're going to be applying film, you're going to be applying grain, and by default, whatever film you choose, let's say from the color rendering, it is going to apply that particular profile. But you can go in and you can change that. So let's say we used a color negative film, the Portra 400. You can go in and customize all of this stuff. And I feel like now I'm going into way more detail about this than I did the other software, or the parts of the software with presets. It's just once you get the hang of how to navigate the presets, it's the same no matter what. Whereas in FilmPack here, there's a lot of different tools to talk about and sliders to adjust. I'm going to go into, there's no large grain positive films here, are there? I just want to zoom in and show you what that is going to look like here. Zoom into 100%. There we go. So we're zoomed into 100%, and what looks like noise is actually the grain being applied. So if I turn this off, there is a little bit of color noise in the image. We could get rid of that in here, but if I turn this back on, what you're going to notice is that this color grain is being applied, and that grain is specific to the Fuji Pro Via 400X. So what happens is you might find a particular grain that you really like, and you always want to use that grain, in which case you can save a preset so that you always get the same grain, right? So this is the Lomo X Pro slide film, and there is a lot of really big grain in here, which I think is kind of pretty, and actually works well. It works very well to put grain on images if you're compositing photographs, but it can work really nicely to add grain if you're making a print of an image as well. It can reduce the sense of noise if there's any digital noise left over, and it can also kind of unify the image in a really beautiful way. Now that said, a lot of folks don't like grain, so maybe folks will stay away from that. Anyways, channel mixer. Channel mixer is actually mostly used for the black and white film emulations. It allows you to lighten or darken how those colors are translating into black and white. You can use it while it's in color, right? And so what this is doing is taking anything that's red in the image, and I've slid it to the left, it's darkening it down, but it's much more effective to use the channel mixer when you're on a black and white conversion. Creative vignetting, this is what I wanted to use on the other image. The creative vignetting is within DxO FilmPack, and it allows us to vignette the image. You can replace the center. So let's say we darken the edge. Our midpoint is wherever you set the center to, but it's basically this slider allows you to encroach into the image if you take that midpoint all the way to the right, or not encroach so far into the image if you bring that to the left. And then you have a transition slider, which is the gradient, right? So the softness of the transition, or softness of the gradient between where the vignette is and where it is not. And then the roundness, so you can have a circular vignette, and then you could have a rectangular vignette, which the rectangular vignette, I guess it needs to be, your midpoint has to be set pretty far in. But this might even just be used as a frame, and technically it's a vignette, but we have no transition here, so it's just a hard edge, and then you have the roundness set to 0, and it definitely gives an interesting effect. We're going to stick with that, I think. Just for the sake of me showing you, though, I do want to show you what happens if you adjust the center. So you can click on this button, and let's say you decide that you don't want the center of the image to be where the vignette is applied to. In this case, the center kind of works because this composition is just very, very centered. But if I start to pull this down, I can actually recenter the vignette. And then this kind of acts like a gradient, right? Or a neutral density kind of filter in a particular area, depending upon how you set it. All right, so we're coming up on time here. So I want to finish up and just show you the last few things, and then again, button up the preset editor. So blur. The blur tool allows you to creatively blur the image. You can use a blur with a vignette or a blur that basically soft focuses the image. And then it's a combination of using the intensity and the diffusion to kind of decide how much of that blur you want. And so this can be a really nice way. Like this now starts to look like a really funky plastic lens look instead of, you know, the perfect Olympus sort of digital camera feel that you get out of the original raw file. So we're starting to really get some creative output here. I'm going to turn blur off. We're going to turn frame on. The frames, if we scroll down a little bit, we've got some really fun sort of film frames. I'm going to turn my vignette off because you can't see what the frame is doing if my vignette is on the way we had it on. Let's close this stuff up. We're within the frame section here, and you have some really interesting, fun frames that you can apply to your image. And here's the thing, you can choose your frame with the frame dropdown. The size is how far into the image it sort of encroaches, and then you have the position. The position set on this left setting, which some of these frames allow you to do, encroaches into the image. If you click on this button, it actually kind of expands the canvas. And what that means is if I bring my size down, let's bring it to 100. If you look at the difference here, the position set like this encroaches into the image. The position set like this, you see the entire photograph and the frame kind of sits on the outside of it. Texture, this is a texture overlay, so you can apply papers and stains to the image. So anyone familiar with like Analog Effects Pro, a lot of these tools cross over. But the beauty of using these tools right in your PhotoLab software is that they are very easily removed if you don't want them anymore. Technically, you can do that with Analog Effects Pro, but with things like the texture, oh, what the heck am I doing there? Things like the texture and even your film grain, you can have some different effects on your image, and then it's parametric and it's the raw processing software that you're probably launching the Nik plugins from, if you're using the Nik plugins, that is. And so I do find myself using some of these features instead of going into analog if all I want is a light leak, right? Or all I need to do is put a cool frame on the image or something like that. So these light leaks emulate, you know, some really interesting light leaks that you could, your film could be affected with when shooting film. Long story short, FilmPack is all about emulating both historical as well as contemporary film types, and these are your controls. Let's say we love this effect and we want to save this as a preset. We move back over to the left side of the interface. I'm actually going to click on Dan Made, because then when I click on my add as a preset, it adds it directly into that particular folder. And I'm going to name this, I think it was Fuji, no, it was a Kodak Portra 400, and I'm going to call it custom because I definitely changed it. And that should save, and you know, happy day. There we go. We're good to go. Now, if we go to a different image, and then I click on that Kodak Portra 400, we're going to get that same exact effect. So I've moved to the Kodak Portra 400 custom. I've clicked the apply button. It is now applied on our portrait. But maybe it's not exactly what we want. Well, what we would do is just simply move over into our tools palette. And in this case, I think that the color rendering, that portrait film, is one of the reasons why. Oh, maybe it's the filter, because I think I put a warm filter on here as well. Yeah, let's see what happens if we turn this off. That's a little bit better, but I think that the portrait film color rendering is not what we want with this image. So maybe what we would do is either reduce it, right, or choose a different rendering. But all you do is click on the preset that you want to use, click apply, it applies it to the image. Then you can move over to the right side of the interface here and update and change to this specific image, right? Now, let's say we much preferred this overall effect. What we could do if we wanted to edit this preset is I can just update it, right? And I can do that, so I click edit, and then I can right click and make my changes to this. So I'll actually have to go into my intensity and dial that back. And then I can click save on the right side, and that's going to save that as an updated preset. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. Have an absolutely fantastic weekend and enjoy your software and enjoy your photography. Thanks. Bye.